The night was colder than anything the small town had felt in many years. The air outside was sharp, freezing every sound and every breath. Snow covered the old farms like a white blanket, but it did not feel soft or warm. It felt dangerous. Like the world had stopped moving inside his small wooden house. Jacob sat near the fire, rubbing his hands together. He had lived alone for a long time, and nights like this made the loneliness feel heavier. Jacob tried to sleep, but something about the night felt wrong. The wind outside wasn't normal. It howled like it was angry. Then, through his window, Jacob saw something strange in the sky. A flash of blue light cut across the darkness like a knife. It wasn't lightning, and it wasn't a shooting star. It felt alive. Jacob stood and walked closer to the window. Pressing his hand on the glass, the cold burned his skin, but he didn't move. Another flash appeared, brighter this time. Then another and another. The lights moved too fast, too sharp, like they didn't belong to the sky at all. Then suddenly, everything went dark and silent again. As if the sky had taken a deep breath and stopped. Jacob shook his head, thinking maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him. He was tired, after all, but just as he turned away from the window, he heard it, a heavy thud from outside. Not far from his house, maybe behind the barn. Then came a sound he had never heard before, a soft cry. Not human, not animal. Something between the two. Jacob felt his heart jump. He grabbed his lantern, put on his coat, and opened the door. Cold wind rushed inside like a wave of ice, but he stepped out anyway. Every step toward the barn felt heavier than the last. The snow was deep, and the storm made it hard to see. But he followed the strange sound, letting his instincts guide him. When he reached the barn door, the crying grew louder. It wasn't a helpless sound, but it was full of pain and fear. Jacob placed his hand on the wooden door. He hesitated for a moment. He lived alone, and strange noises in the night could mean danger. But something inside him whispered, "Open it." So he pushed the door slowly, letting the lantern light spill into the dark barn. The first thing he saw was movement in the corner. Something curled up, something shaking. Jacob lifted the lantern higher, and then his breath caught in his throat. Two glowing eyes stared back at him, not the eyes of any animal he had seen before. These eyes were bright, almost silver, and full of fear. As the lantern light grew stronger, he saw more. A tall figure sitting against the back wall of the barn. Its skin looked smooth and pale, with a faint blue glow under the surface and in its arms. A small creature, a baby, wrapped in something like silver cloth. Jacob froze, unable to move or breathe. The mother, if that was what she was, pulled the baby closer. Her body was shaking, not from cold, but from pain. She looked hurt, exhausted, and terrified. The baby cried again. The soft, strange sound Jacob heard earlier. It was weak, cold, and desperate. Jacob took one slow step forward, and the alien mother tensed. Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. She was ready to fight him if she had to. Even in her weak state, she would protect her baby. Jacob raised his free hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I won't hurt you," he whispered, though he knew she probably couldn't understand. But something in his voice made her pause. The glowing eyes softened just a little. Enough for Jacob to take another careful step. The barn was freezing, and Jacob realized the baby might not survive long in this cold. He looked at the mother and pointed toward the blankets stacked nearby. Then he touched his chest gently, trying to show kindness. "I want to help," he said softly. The mother watched him closely, breathing hard for a moment. Nothing happened. Then, slowly, painfully, she nodded. It was small, but it was trust. And it melted something inside Jacob's lonely heart. He moved to the blankets, lifted them, and brought them closer. The mother didn't move away this time. Instead, she loosened her grip just enough for Jacob to see the baby clearly. The baby's skin glowed faintly blue, like the mother's. Its eyes were closed tightly, crying softly. Jacob wrapped the blanket around the baby with gentle hands. The mother watched every motion. But she didn't stop him. Outside, the wind grew louder. Jacob heard something strange in the distance, not the cry of a human, not the howl of an animal, something bigger, heavier. Searching, Jacob's heart tightened. He looked at the alien mother, and she looked back at him with fear in her glowing eyes. They weren't alone tonight, and whatever had fallen from the sky wasn't the only thing coming. Jacob stood still in the cold barn, holding the baby close to the lantern light. The mother's glowing eyes followed his every move, sharp and fearful. She was weak, but her spirit was fierce, and she was ready to defend her child with her last breath. Jacob understood this without a single word spoken. The baby's cries softened as the warm blanket wrapped around its small body. Jacob could feel the tiny creature shiver, its skin cool like smooth metal under his fingers. But the glow under the baby's skin flickered gently. Like a dying candle trying to stay alive, the mother reached out with trembling hands, lightly touching the blanket to make sure her baby was safe. Her touch was gentle, almost human in its worry. Jacob felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. A quiet pull toward responsibility, toward protection. He slowly set the baby back into the mother's arms. She tightened her hold immediately, pulling the infant close to her chest. Her breathing was heavy, each breath like a struggling machine. Jacob realized she wasn't just cold, she was injured. A dark purple mark ran across her side. Glowing faintly under her skin, it looked burned, but not like fire. More like something had struck her with energy or electricity. Jacob raised his lantern higher, letting warm light fill the barn. The mother squinted at the light, but didn't look away. Her face was different from any creature Jacob knew. But her expression was something universal, fear mixed with hope. Jacob crouched slowly beside her, keeping his hands open and visible. "I don't know if you can understand me," he whispered. "But you and your baby won't survive this cold without help." The mother looked at him quietly. Her eyes softening, she placed a hand on her chest, then carefully touched the baby's head. Jacob understood what she meant. Her baby was all that mattered outside. A sudden thump echoed in the snow. Jacob lifted his head sharply, every muscle in his body going tight. The mother reacted instantly to pulling the baby close and turning her body protectively. Jacob moved to the barn door and peeked through a crack. Snowflakes danced in the wind. But something else moved with them. He saw shadows, big ones, walking slowly through the storm. He couldn't see the shapes clearly, but they were tall, wide, and too silent for anything human. Jacob stepped back, heart pounding. The mother watched him, her glowing eyes filled with fear that told him she already knew what was out there. She pointed weakly toward the cracks in the walls. Her hand trembling, Jacob followed her gesture. And the message became clear. Those things were hunting her. Jacob felt a cold chill deeper than the winter air. He knelt in front of her again, looking at her wound. He couldn't fix what had hurt her, but he could try to keep her alive. He took a deep breath and gently touched his chest, then her wound. Then he shook his head slowly, showing he didn't know how to heal it. Her eyes softened once more. She understood. But she didn't blame him. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and placed her hand lightly on Jacob's forehead. For a moment, he felt a warm pulse spread across his skin, like a flash of emotion. Not words, but meaning. He felt her fear, her exhaustion, her hope, and beneath it all, her desperate wish to save her baby. Her touch was brief, but it left Jacob's heart pounding. He pulled back slightly, not in fear, but in understanding. Jacob pointed toward the house, trying to show her they could move inside where it was warmer, but the mother shook her head quickly. Clutching the baby close, she whispered something, a sound like wind moving through metal. Jacob didn't know the language, but her body language said enough. Going outside was too dangerous. The hunters were close, too close. Another deep thump sounded outside, followed by a low growl. Jacob swallowed hard. Even without seeing them, he felt their presence pressing against the night. They were hunting with purpose, with intelligence. They weren't animals wandering by chance. They were tracking her. Jacob took a deep breath and looked around the barn. It wasn't perfect, but he had to make it safe. He moved quickly now, blocking the windows with hay bales. Stacking old crates near the walls, the mother watched him with wide, surprised eyes. Jacob wasn't running away. He wasn't abandoning her. He was helping. And that realization broke something inside her fear. For the first time, she believed she might not be alone. When Jacob finished, he sat near her, keeping a respectful distance. The barn was dark, except for the glow from the lantern and the soft blue light from her skin. The baby rested quietly now, breathing weakly but calmer than before. The mother traced a soft pattern across the baby's forehead, a gesture full of love and worry. Jacob finally whispered, "You're safe here." He didn't know if she understood the words, but she understood his voice. She looked at him with eyes no longer full of fear, but something warmer, something like trust. Outside, the storm howled louder. Footsteps moved through the snow, slow and deliberate. The hunters were still searching. But for tonight, Jacob had made his choice. He would protect the alien mother and her child with everything he had. Because sometimes heroes weren't chosen. They were made on the coldest nights. The storm outside grew stronger, shaking the old wooden barn like a giant hand pushing against it. Jacob stood near the door, listening carefully, his lantern flickering as cold wind tried to creep in through every crack. Behind him, the alien mother held her baby close. Her glowing eyes watching the shadows on the walls, she sensed something Jacob couldn't. Something deeper than sound, something older than fear. A soft vibration moved through the ground. Not thunder, not wind, something walking, something heavy. Jacob felt it through his boots, like the earth itself was warning him. He stepped forward and peeked through a narrow gap in the barn wall. What he saw made his heart skip. Large footprints pressed deep into the snow outside, too large to belong to any animal he knew. The edges of the prints glowed faintly, as if whatever made them carried heat or energy inside its body. Jacob stared at them, breath fogging the air. The tracks circled the barn slowly, like a predator testing the strength of its prey. The mother made a soft, alarmed sound. Jacob turned and saw her pointing at the prints with one shaking hand. Her eyes glowed brighter, silver light dancing like fire. She whispered something in her strange language, a single word repeated twice. Jacob didn't understand the language, but he understood her fear. Whatever made those tracks wasn't just dangerous, it was searching for her. Jacob returned to the gap in the wall and squinted through the swirling snow. Then he saw movement. A tall shape passed between the trees. Too smooth for an animal, too silent for a machine. Another shape followed behind, moving with practiced steps. Their bodies were dark and metallic, curving like armor. They carried glowing spears that crackled with sharp blue energy. Jacob's skin prickled just looking at them. The hunters, they weren't human. They weren't friendly. They weren't here by mistake. They were tracking the alien mother and her baby with deadly purpose. Jacob backed away from the wall, fear grabbing his stomach. "This is bad," he whispered, even though neither of them understood each other's words. The mother held her baby tighter. She closed her eyes as if remembering something painful. Then she leaned forward and drew a small symbol in the dusty barn floor with her finger. It glowed faint blue for a moment, like a spark of her energy. Jacob stared at the symbol, confused. The mother tapped the symbol gently, then pointed to the prince outside. Then she crossed her arms in front of her chest and shook her head. Jacob swallowed hard. He understood the meaning. Those creatures were not animals, they were alien hunters. And they were after her baby. Outside, snow-crunching footsteps moved closer. Jacob looked at the barn door and felt panic push at his ribs. He wasn't a fighter. He didn't know anything about alien hunters. He didn't have weapons, but he had something that mattered. He had made a promise without speaking. A promise to help and protect. The mother looked at Jacob with wide eyes. Her face was pale, her breathing weak. She needed rest. Warmth and safety. The baby needed even more. Jacob couldn't fight the hunters, but he could buy time. He could hide them. He could make sure the hunters didn't find them easily. He began moving quietly around the barn, blocking more cracks with old blankets and wooden boards. He stacked hay near the windows to dull any light. He placed his lantern behind a crate to soften the glow. The mother watched him with a look that mixed fear and hope. She didn't know why he was helping her, but she trusted him now. And trust, even silent trust, was powerful. Suddenly, a heavy thud hit the barn door. Jacob jumped back, heart racing. The mother gasped and pulled the baby close, her entire body shaking. Another thud followed, louder this time. Something was testing the door. Not breaking it yet, just pushing, just listening, just smelling. Jacob held his breath. He could hear the hunters breathing outside low, slow, controlled, like wolves studying a trapped deer. Snow crunched as they walked around the barn again. Their glowing spears hummed with sharp blue electricity, lighting the snow around them. Jacob peeked through another crack and saw one hunter lean close to the wall, its mask-like face tilted, as if smelling the wood, as if sensing heat inside. Jacob backed away, hands shaking. He looked at the mother. Her glowing eyes met his. For a moment, he felt something pass between them. Fear, trust, and a shared understanding. Jacob whispered, "Stay quiet." He tapped his chest, then pointed to the other side of the barn. He had a plan, a dangerous plan, but a plan. The footsteps outside paused. The hunters had stopped moving. The night air felt heavier, thicker, as if the hunters were deciding their next move. And in the silent darkness, one thought echoed in Jacob's mind. If they find the mother and baby tonight, it will be the end. The hunters stood outside the barn like shadows made of metal and anger. Jacob knew the door wouldn't hold forever. The wood shook gently every time one of the creatures stepped near it. The alien mother held her baby close, her body trembling with fear and exhaustion. But Jacob couldn't let fear control him now. He needed a plan, a real one, and quickly. He looked around the dark barn, searching for anything useful. Old tools hung on rusty nails. Broken wooden crates lay in corners. There was nothing strong enough to fight alien hunters. But Jacob wasn't planning to fight. He was planning to escape. His eyes fell on a dusty trapdoor near the back of the barn, half hidden under a pile of old hay. Memories rushed back to him. His father had built a cold storage tunnel under the barn many years ago for vegetables and grain. Jacob hadn't used it in ages. He had almost forgotten it existed, but now, that forgotten tunnel might be their only chance. He moved quickly toward the trapdoor, brushing the hay aside. The wooden handle was cold in his hand. He lifted it slowly, trying not to make noise. The hinges creaked softly, but the storm outside helped hide the sound. Cold air rose from the dark tunnel. It smelled like dust, old earth, and memories. Jacob motioned to the alien mother, pointing toward the open trapdoor. She watched him with confused eyes, not understanding at first. Then he pointed at the door shaking behind them. Then the tunnel again, making a gesture of down. Finally, the meaning hit her. Her eyes widened as she realized Jacob was offering them a way out. She tried to stand, but her legs trembled under her weight. Her wound pulsed with faint blue light. Jacob rushed forward to help. He held out his hands carefully. Giving her time to decide, she hesitated, then slowly handed the baby to him. Jacob froze for a moment. Shocked by the trust, the baby, warm under the blanket, clung to Jacob's shirt with tiny glowing fingers. Jacob felt something deep inside him shift. Protecting this child felt natural, right, important. He held the baby securely and helped the mother move toward the trapdoor. She gritted her teeth against the pain. Breathing hard, every step was slow, but she was determined. She would crawl through fire if it meant saving her child. Outside, another heavy thud hit the barn door. This one harder, strong enough to shake snow from the roof. Jacob's heart raced. They were running out of time. He helped the mother lower herself into the tunnel. The ladder was old, but it held her weight. Her feet touched the cold floor below. Jacob followed, still holding the baby close to his chest before pulling the trapdoor shut. He pushed loose hay and old boards over it from below. To anyone inside the barn, it would look like nothing had been disturbed. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and freezing cold. Only Jacob's lantern lit the way. Their breath came out in pale clouds that floated in the dim air. The walls were made of stone and old wood. Built by hands long gone, the floor was packed dirt, cold as ice. But it was safe, safer than the barn above. At least for now, they began moving slowly. Jacob walking ahead with the lantern, the mother behind him. The baby made soft noises, but no loud cries, almost as if it knew silence was needed for survival. The mother whispered to the baby in her strange language. Her voice sounded like wind and music mixed together. Soft, calm, loving, behind them. A loud crash echoed through the tunnel walls. Jacob stopped and turned. The hunters had broken down the barn door. Their heavy steps shook the wooden floor above them. Jacob felt dread crawl up his spine. They were searching the barn. And if the hunters found the trapdoor? Keep moving, Jacob whispered to the mother. She nodded weakly and pushed forward. Her breath came in short gasps. Her wound glowed brighter, warning Jacob that she was losing strength quickly. The tunnel twisted and turned. Cobwebs brushed Jacob's shoulders. Old wooden beams groaned under pressure. In some places, the ceiling was low, forcing them to crawl. But Jacob kept going, guiding them like a man walking through his childhood memories. Outside, thunderous footsteps moved directly above them. The hunters were sniffing the ground, searching. Jacob prayed the hay and boards would fool them. He held the baby close, feeling its tiny heartbeat. The child's skin glowed gently, reacting to danger. The glow lit Jacob's face like soft blue fire. The mother placed a hand on the wall to steady herself. Her eyes closed for a moment. Full of pain, Jacob stopped and turned toward her. "You can do this," he whispered. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She opened her eyes again, determination shining through the fear. They reached the end of the tunnel at last. A wooden hatch led out into the forest behind the farm. Jacob pushed it open slowly, letting snow fall inside as the cold air rushed in. The night was still dark, but farther from the barn, the danger felt thinner. They climbed out quietly. Jacob first with the baby, then helping the mother. The forest surrounded them like a wall of shadows. The wind howled, carrying their warm breath away. But they were alive, and for now, unseen. The hunters were still close, their metallic roars echoing across the white fields. But Jacob and the alien mother had escaped, barely together, and the night was far from over. Asterisk snowflakes drifted through the trees like tiny glowing sparks as Jacob, The alien mother and the baby moved deeper into the forest. The wind was freezing, biting at Jacob's face. But he didn't slow down. He held the baby close, keeping the small body shielded from the cold. The alien mother limped beside him, her breathing uneven, her wound glowing brighter with every step. She was running out of strength, and Jacob knew it. The forest was quiet except for the distant roars of the hunters. Their metallic voices echoed across the snow, searching, tracking, hunting. Jacob felt the sound in his bones. He kept glancing back, fearing he would see their glowing spears cutting through the darkness. After several minutes, the mother touched Jacob's arm gently. She pointed toward a cluster of large fallen logs near a frozen stream. Jacob understood she needed rest. He helped her sit down on the largest log, and she leaned her back against a tree, closing her eyes for a moment. The baby in Jacob's arms let out a soft whimper. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried a strange energy. A glow spread under the baby's skin, soft and warm like moonlight trapped under water. Jacob stared at the glow, amazed and worried at the same time. "What are you?" he whispered softly to the small creature. The baby blinked up at him, its eyes bright blue and full of innocence. There was something deep in those eyes, something ancient and powerful. Jacob couldn't explain it, but he felt it. The alien mother opened her eyes and reached toward Jacob. Her fingers touched his forehead again, a warm, gentle pulse of energy spreading like ripples in still water. This time, the connection was stronger. Jacob gasped softly as images flooded his mind. Not words, not sounds, but memories, emotions, truths. A broken world under a dark sky, cities made of crystal and light, beings walking in harmony, then chaos, explosions. Fire falling from the sky, strange machines destroying everything. The alien mother running, desperate, carrying her baby through burning ruins. A powerful glow around the child, a hope, a danger, a prophecy. Jacob stumbled back slightly as the connection ended. He breathed heavily, trying to understand everything he had seen. He looked at the mother, his voice trembling. "Your planet." "It's gone." She nodded slowly, pain shining in her eyes. Her world wasn't destroyed by nature or accident. It had been destroyed by the same hunters chasing them now. Jacob looked down at the baby. The glow under the child's skin grew brighter for a moment. Swirling like moving starlight, the mother placed her hand gently over the baby. She touched Jacob's chest again, slowly and with meaning. Then she pointed to the baby. Then she spread her fingers wide. Showing a burst of light, Jacob watched carefully. Piecing her message together, the baby wasn't just any child. It carried power, real power, power strong enough to restore a dead world. Or destroy one. The hunters wanted that power. Not to protect it, but to control it, to use it. To turn it into a weapon. Jacob felt his stomach twist. He looked at the baby again, now sleeping quietly in the blanket he had given it, this small, fragile creature held the fate of entire worlds inside its tiny body, and he, just a simple farmer, was the only shield between the baby and the monsters hunting it. The alien mother leaned forward, placing her hand over Jacob's heart. She shared another flash of emotion, gratitude, trust, hope. She believed Jacob could protect her child, even when she knew her own strength was fading. But the moment of calm didn't last long. A deep roar echoed through the forest, closer this time. Snow fell from branches as something big moved toward them. Jacob stood quickly, gripping the baby tight. The mother tried to stand too, pain twisting her face. She stumbled. But Jacob caught her arm, helping her up. "We have to move," Jacob whispered. The mother nodded. Forcing her weak legs to carry her forward, they walked along the frozen stream, their breaths sharp in the cold night air. Behind them, heavy footsteps crunched in the snow. Closer, closer, the hunters were near. Suddenly, the baby in Jacob's arms began to glow even brighter. A soft hum filled the air, vibrating gently like a quiet song. The glow spread across Jacob's arms and chest. Warming his cold skin, the mother whispered something quickly. Urgently, her voice was shaking, but full of warning. Jacob didn't understand the words, but he understood the fear in her eyes. The baby's glow was a signal, a reaction to danger, a warning, and maybe a weapon. The light grew stronger. Spinning like a tiny star in Jacob's hands, he felt energy building. Like a storm gathering strength inside the baby's small body, the mother reached out in fear. Trying to calm the child, Jacob stepped closer to her. Shielding them both from the cold wind, the glow continued rising, filling the forest with pale blue light, casting long shadows through the trees. Then, from the darkness, a metallic roar answered the glow. The hunters had found them. Their eyes flashed like angry fire through the snow. Their glowing spears crackled with deadly power. They were coming fast. Jacob tightened his grip around the baby. He looked at the mother, and she looked back with the same thought in her eyes. They had run as far as they could. They had hidden as long as possible. Now, they would have to face what was coming together. Asterisk snow whipped across the trees as the hunters stepped into view, their tall metal bodies glowing faintly in the moonlight. Jacob felt the ground shake under their heavy steps, each movement slow and controlled, like predators savoring the moment before the kill. The alien mother clung to a tree trunk for balance, her breath fast, her wound pulsing weak blue light through her skin. Jacob stood between her and the hunters, holding the glowing baby tight against his chest. He wasn't strong, he wasn't trained, and he had no weapon. But he had something those creatures didn't: a heart willing to fight for someone who needed him. The hunters stopped several yards away, their glowing spears crackling with sharp energy. Cold light reflected off their armor as they raised their heads to study Jacob. They tilted their faces like machines trying to understand a puzzle, as if thinking, why is a human standing in their way? Why isn't he running? Why is he protecting the child that should belong to them? Jacob swallowed hard, fear strangling his throat. But he took a small step forward, planting his boots firmly in the snow. "You're not taking them," he whispered, his voice shaking but determined. The hunters didn't understand his words, but they understood his stance. They lowered their spears, preparing to attack. The baby in Jacob's arms let out a soft cry. Its skin brightened. Glowing like a tiny sun trapped in a blanket, the energy hummed through Jacob's body. Warming him from the inside, he felt stronger, braver, as if the child's courage was flowing into him. The alien mother whispered something weak and desperate. She tried to reach for Jacob, but her legs gave out. She collapsed in the snow, barely catching herself with one hand. Her other hand stretched toward the baby, her eyes full of fear, warning him of something he was too human to understand. Jacob glanced at her, worried, but he couldn't step back if he moved. The hunters would go straight for her, so he tightened his grip and faced the monsters again. The first hunter lunged forward, charging through the snow with terrifying speed. Jacob had no plan, no skill, no idea how to survive. He braced himself, preparing to be hit. The spear came down, but before it could strike, the baby screamed, a soft but powerful sound. A wave of blue light exploded outward from its tiny body. The force blasted straight into the hunter's chest. The metal creature stumbled back, sliding across the snow, steam rising from its armor. The other hunters roared, metallic voices filled with fury. They didn't expect resistance, especially not from a human and a baby. Jacob stared at the child in disbelief. The baby looked up at him with glowing eyes, as if saying, "I am not helpless, not anymore." But the burst of energy, came at a price. The baby's light dimmed quickly, its body going limp in Jacob's arms. The mother gasped and dragged herself forward in the snow. Reaching for her child, Jacob kneeled beside her. Placing the baby gently into her arms, the baby's glow flickered weakly. It needed protection, safety, not more fighting. The hunters recovered fast, their movements sharper and angrier now. Two stepped forward, spears crackling in the dark. The third circled to cut off any escape path. Jacob stood again, his hands shaking. He grabbed a broken tree branch from the ground thin. Weak, useless as a weapon, but he held it anyway. Because sometimes a symbol of resistance was stronger than steel. He planted himself in front of the mother and baby. Legs shaking, breaths fast, eyes burning with fear and courage. "If you want them," he said in a rough whisper, "you go through me first." The hunters stopped again. Confused, this human refused to move, refused to drop the stick, refused to show fear, even though he was drowning in it. One hunter stepped closer, studying Jacob carefully. Its glowing visor tilted slightly. The air around the spear crackled with deadly energy. Jacob tightened his grip on the stick until his knuckles turned white. He knew he couldn't win, but he could buy them one more minute. One more breath, one more moment of hope. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. A low hum filled the forest, vibrating through the air like a heartbeat growing louder and louder. The hunters froze, recognizing the sound instantly. They turned their heads toward the sky, their bodies stiff, alarmed. A bright beam of white light cut through the clouds above. Snow swirled upward as a large ship descended silently from the sky. Its surface glowed like liquid silver. Its engines whispered instead of roared. The hunters stepped back, lowering their weapons. Fear finally entered their movements. This was not their ship. This was something stronger, something that protected the last survivors of the alien mother's people. Jacob turned to the mother, her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but relief. Her people had found them. The hunters roared in frustration, but they were already losing. The silver ship hovered above, shining down like a second moon. And for the first time that night, hope felt real, warm, alive. As the light from the ship grew brighter, Jacob realized this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The silver ship hovered above the forest like a glowing star brought down to earth. Its light poured through the trees, turning every snowflake into a tiny spark of white fire. Jacob shielded his eyes, feeling warm air wash over him, pushing back the cold that had followed them all night. The alien mother lifted her head slowly, her eyes filled with new hope. For the first time since Jacob had found her in the barn, she didn't look frightened. She looked relieved, grateful, saved. The hunters, however, reacted with pure fear. Their tall metal bodies stiffened, and their glowing spears dimmed. They stepped backward, trying to fade into the shadows like frightened animals. The ship's humming grew louder, a deep sound that made the ground vibrate under Jacob's boots. A beam of white light stretched from the ship to the snow, forming a glowing pathway. It looked like a road made of moonlight, inviting yet powerful. The hunters let out frustrated roars, but none dared attack. They knew the strength behind that ship. The mother looked at Jacob with shaking hands and held out the baby to him for a moment. Jacob blinked in surprise. The child's faint blue glow reflected in his eyes. The baby reached out one tiny hand and touched Jacob's chin gently. A soft warmth spread through him, not pain, not fear. Just pure innocence and connection. The mother touched Jacob's arm. A small pulse of energy passed through her fingers. In that instant, Jacob felt a message in his heart. Not in words, but in emotion. A thank you, a goodbye. A memory she wanted him to keep forever. Jacob's chest tightened. He had only known them for a few hours, but it felt like a lifetime of fear, courage, trust, and humanity. The mother turned toward the beam of light. Her legs trembled, her wound still glowing with weakness. Jacob helped her stand, supporting her with one arm. The baby rested against her shoulder again, glowing softly, breathing quietly, together. They stepped toward the shining path. The hunters growled, but none dared stop them. The ship's presence was too strong, too powerful, too final. As the mother reached the edge of the light, she stopped and looked back at Jacob. Her eyes were soft, silver, glowing with emotion. She placed her free hand on her chest, then slowly pointed at Jacob's heart, a message without language. "You are part of us now." Jacob swallowed hard, his breath shaking in the cold air. He never felt important before. He never felt noticed. But this alien mother looked at him like he had saved a world. Maybe he had. Maybe protecting her child meant saving something far bigger than a single life. The baby reached out again, small fingers opening and closing in the air. Jacob stepped closer, letting the tiny hand grasp his finger. A warm pulse spread through him, a feeling like hope, a promise. A bond he didn't understand yet, but felt deeply. He whispered softly, "Be safe." "Little one," even though he knew they couldn't understand his words, the feeling was enough. The ship's light brightened, signaling it was time. The mother nodded once at Jacob, tears glowing on her cheeks. Tears that caught the light like tiny stars. She stepped into the beam, and her body lifted gently off the ground. Not thrown, not pulled, lifted like she belonged to the sky. The baby glowed brighter in her arms. Its small face, calm now, safe, protected. Jacob watched them float upward, higher, higher. Until they reached the bottom of the ship, a circular door opened silently. Silver blue light poured outward, welcoming them inside. The mother disappeared into the brightness. The baby's last tiny hand wave dissolved into the light as the door closed behind them. For a long moment, Jacob stood in the snow. Staring up at the ship, he didn't blink, he didn't breathe, he just watched. The hunters roared angrily from the shadows, but the ship ignored them. A final hum filled the air as it prepared to leave. Then, a small metal object dropped from the ship, landing gently in the snow at Jacob's feet. He picked it up carefully, holding it under the light. It was a crystal-like device, glowing faint blue. The same color as the mother's tears. The same color as the baby's heartbeat. The crystal lit up, projecting a small image of the alien mother. Her voice, now translated, echoed softly in the air. "Thank you. Human friend, we will return. You are family now." Jacob felt his throat tighten. The ship rose slowly into the sky, its glow spreading across the forest like a second dawn. Snow fell around him gently, whispering through the trees. The hunters turned and fled, knowing their mission had failed. Knowing the child was beyond their reach, beyond their world. Jacob watched until the ship became a star among stars. Then he finally breathed out on the coldest night of his life. He saved two strangers from another world. And in doing so, he found something he had lost long ago: purpose, connection, and hope. The forest fell quiet again. But Jacob knew his life would never be quiet the same way again. Because heroes aren't always chosen. Sometimes they are ordinary people. Standing in the snow, holding a glowing baby, saying the right words at the right moment. And sometimes that is enough to change the universe.